Welcome back. So in this video, we'll be looking more into playing for study in more depth. And we're going to do this by actually observing how I would normally go about this process. But just to recap, the idea behind playing games for study rather than for enjoyment is to be able to observe the game world, its mechanics, and its functionality. You will want to observe how those mechanics interact with each other, how they impact the gameplay, how they impact the environment, how they impact the player's immersion, how they impact the player directly, whether that be through controls or through visuals or through any other asset of the game itself and its existence. You will be wanting to observe the aesthetics of the game, try to get an understanding of why certain objects are designed the way they are, why the environment is placed the way it is, why certain objects exist within this world, and you'll be wanting to ask yourself a whole bunch of questions during this process. For example, when you're, let's say, looking at a particular plant, depending on the setting, does this plant fit this setting? Is this plant supposed to be here? Is this an indoor plant or an outdoor plant? Does it grow this height? Is it its relative size? There's a bunch of things you'll want to consider. And these are just very small portions of a wider purpose of planning a game for study. So I'm going to go over just a few of those points here in this video. So hopefully this will help you derive your own way of planning a game for study within the context of what it is that you're looking to observe. However, I do want to take this time to note that before you actually start playing a game for study, try to understand what your concept is for your game. You will at the very least want a very minimalistic understanding of how you want your game to look, how you want your game to feel, how you want your gameplay to be. All of these will help you better narrow how you would go about playing for study. So to get an idea of what it is that we'll be planning for in this series, I recommend going over to video 3, which is titled Concepts of the Concept Book, to get a good understanding of what it is that we'll be planning for. This way you'll actually have a good understanding of the context as to why I'm looking for what it is that I'm looking for or trying to observe. So let's just jump right into this. This is Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where I'll be doing the playing for study here towards the beginning of the game. At this part of the game, the player is first being introduced to Abstergo Industries from this character, Melanie Mal, where she'll immediately lead us upstairs to our workstation.
So here we are, your very own Animus workstation.
But I want to take a tour. I want to take a look around, see how the environment's like and whatnot. So that's what I'm going to do. So here, the very first thing I recommend, and this is assuming that you'll be taking snapshots and or video capture of your playing for study, I would actually recommend going through your display settings first. This is mainly so you can get the image quality to be the way you want it as you record or take your snapshots. As in, this is the way you want your references to turn out, not necessarily the way you want to experience the game as it is. For me, I keep everything on low settings because, well, I kind of like the aesthetic and the graphical quality when it's very low. Plus, my computer likes it because it won't have to complain about asthma attacks. Although, for your own references and recording, you may actually want to try getting your recordings or your snapshots at both low and high resolutions. So that way you will have a noticeable differences between the environment and the way it is rendered. But I'm still going to keep the resolution at 1920 by 1080p at 60 Hz, mostly because I want the texture resolution to be at its highest, despite the fact that the rendering itself is not going to be at its high. This is mostly my own preference, but it's still going to come out fairly well whenever I take a snapshot or a recording. Now, as for me, during this process, I normally like to go to the first object I see. I go up close to it, and I study it. I swivel around it, I try to get a good look at it from different angles, and I take lots of pictures as I film. Now, I understand that some of you may be wondering, hey Herbert, if all you're going to do is just go into the game and take pictures and record exactly what it is you see in the environment, then why not just go to Google Images, just type in Assassin's Creed Black Flag Abstergo, and just grab whatever pictures you can there. Well, yeah, you will get hundreds of pictures, but you're not going to be able to get this sort of angle, or at least not the angles you desire. You see, with the angle that I am able to get within game, I can get a much clearer understanding of how the object was modeled and how much space it takes up and its dimensions. And this information will become very valuable once I actually start building my own assets for the game, especially when it comes to modeling. But that we'll get to in a much later video. Continuing on, I don't only just look at random objects that are in the world. I also study the stairs, the floors, the furniture, the walls, columns, people, the people's positioning, set pieces. I even try to spot the little things that just sort of make the environment feel more real. Like these little security things, whatever they are, scanners I guess, cameras maybe. I mean look, they even have sprinklers. I normally don't see sprinklers in a game environment. It's just one of those details I guess you don't really see that much. And I'm pretty sure that in this game here, at least in this environment, there's two different types of sprinklers, unless these red things are smoke alarms. You know what? Let's go back to the floor for a moment. When I look at the floor, or at least when I study the floor, I'm not just looking at one piece of the floor, or one wall type, or one door type. I look at all the floors, as much of it as I can. I look at as many different types of walls as I can, as many different types of doors that I can, all the wall assets, different types of furniture, or all the furnitures that I can find, even the plants. I look at all the plants. Sorry. That actually brings me to another point. It's actually relevant to this whole playing for study thing, but at the same time, it's in my head, it seems kind of nitpicky. But if you design a sequence to where the player is being led across a certain level, like let's say this here hall, and you have talented artists, or you yourself is a talented artist who put together such an amazingly looking environment here, please do not have some sort of NPC or some other sort of indicator to constantly remind the player to get a move on, especially when there's only one direction the player can actually go anyway. You never know, some players actually want to look around your environment, see how you put it together, see why things are the way they are. This is a very pretty looking environment. And I'm the kind of person who, even when I play a game for enjoyment, I just like to look around wherever I am, at least if I'm not being shot, stabbed, or eaten by something. I just like to look around, just to get an understanding of how much detail was actually put into graphing this one little area of space here. So please, don't do that. The indicator part. In this case, this annoying Mal lady over here. Look, if you absolutely needed to have some sort of indicator to tell the player that, hey, get a move on for whatever reason, especially if there's no real set timer or consequence for taking your or their poor sweet time, then let those indicators be spaced out, like greatly spaced out. Like maybe, a reminder every, minute and a half or 2 minutes, and not every 10 to 13 seconds. Because constantly hearing this...
You didn't go home, did you? Where'd you run off to? Where'd you run off to? Hello? Did you get lost? Where'd you run off to? You didn't go home, did you? Where'd you run off to? You ready? Let's go.
Over and over and over again. It's just grating. So that's something you want to pay attention to. Because some games actually do have a bad habit of doing this. Especially this one. Regardless, I'm not only simply looking at just the environment and what it's populated with. I'm also considering what sounds I hear or think I should hear or think I shouldn't hear that I'm also trying to pay attention to. For instance, in this hall, there are plenty of people here, so you should be able to hear sort of like a low crowd, sort of like mumble, I guess. Like when, for example, you're at your local coffee shop and it's full of people, you hear that. You just hear everyone talking at once. That's what I should sort of be hearing right now. Because there's plenty of people here. Yeah, there might not be all that much reverb going on, considering the layout and the overall design of the space here. But still, there should be some sort of sound being heard from a majority crowd of people. And we're just not getting that. As a matter of fact, the only time we hear other voices is when we stand close to someone. And even then, it's only like one, maybe two at the most speaking. This is something I also would consider when playing for study. Now, some other sounds I would also consider will be, for example, there's a little cooler thing over at the kiosk. I would assume that if you were to step close enough to that, you'd actually hear it, whether it be just giving off a low hum or turning on or off. I think that would actually add a nice little touch to at least this little space, just to make it feel a bit more functional, I guess. Actually, let's go back and see how that will sound with some actual sound.
Someone's watching me.
It's not 30 degrees at one end of the building and 5 at the other.
Where'd you run off to?
Feels like a high-tech company finally.
Coffee was better in the old building.
Yeah, that's true.
Hello? Did you get lost? Hello? Did you get lost?
It'll just take a minute, okay?
I don't know about you, but with the inclusion of these sounds, this small space here actually seems a bit more functional now. Also, for such an elaborate company as this, to have this sort of setup, just even for an entrance alone, I would actually expect to hear, like a PA system or someone being called through an intercom or something like that. Now, actually, let's go back and add in some low crowd sounds and maybe a PA here or there, just to get an idea of how this could work together.
Ahoy players, friends, pirates. Welcome aboard your new improved multiplayer adventure. It's
Where are you
Pirates,
run
it's
off
the
to?
West Indies, it's the massive competitive multiplayer game you know and love, but oh, it's so very much more. Our developers have been working hard below deck to bring you this dangerous, exciting new cast of our house. And little known fact, nearly half of all pirates
Hello?
in the old 80s.
Did you get lost?
Where? On land. We have a brilliant new set of maps from across the Caribbean for you to discover. And we're not going to make you walk the plank and swim the
Hello? Did you get lost?
Elevators don't seem to be. Feels like a high-tech company finally.
Hello? Did you get lost?
Now, I understand that it's probably not necessary, but it would help immerse the player into thinking that this place is fully functional before they were ever here. I've actually noticed the same thing for the second story studio. Now, it's understandable that you probably wouldn't hear like a sort of low crowd mumble there, considering there's a lot less people on the second floor, at least in this one area, than there is in the lobby. But we should be hearing some sort of office sounds. We should be hearing a lot more keys and mouse clicking since, these are workstations. We should be hearing those monitors that are all over the walls. They don't need to be loud. They just need to be just audible enough that when you're near them, you can tell that, yes, that ad is giving off sound. Same could be said about the people as well. Like I said, you don't need a low crowd. You could just have maybe 4, maybe 5 persons, like just those mumbling voices there as if, things are actually happening. It doesn't need to be something realistic. It just needs to be believable for the environment which this sound should be taking place. By the way, while I was also here on the second floor studio, the same environment study I did in the lobby area, I also did up here. And that's where I went from object to object. I studied all the floors, or at least all I could get to, as many walls as I could, all the plants, ceilings, etc., etc. Those I also did up here as well. And with that, I'll end the video here. But if you would like to see a full uncut version of the playing for study, as I did for this episode here, I will leave a link in the description. So if you've liked the material shown here, please like and subscribe. And more importantly, share the video. And if you're able, please help support this channel and this series on my Patreon. It will really help to go a long way with your contribution, as we still have a lot to go over. I'll be seeing you in the next video.